The sun was sinking behind the jagged edges of the prairie, casting long, gold-tinted shadows over the town of Dry Creek, a small settlement clinging stubbornly to life in the middle of nowhere. She leaned against the wooden railing of the saloon porch, boots dusty, heart heavier than the saddle she had abandoned years ago. They called her Lila Marston, a woman who'd once twirled under lantern light, with a smile that could melt the frost off a winter morning. But the music had stopped in her life the day her father fell from the ridge, and the dance floor of her dreams had turned to silence. Her hands gripped the railing like she was holding on to memories, each creak of the boards beneath her feet echoing the emptiness that had grown inside her. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and worn leather, and somewhere down the road, a wagon's wheels groaned against the hard-packed dirt. That's when she saw him, tall, lean, and dusty, a stranger riding a horse that looked like it had survived more than a few storms. He tipped his hat in a gesture both polite and curious, and Lila felt a twinge of something she hadn't felt in years: curiosity. He dismounted with the grace of a man who'd known both hard times and soft nights, boots crunching in rhythm with the prairie's sigh. His eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the saloon porch and settled on hers, and for a heartbeat, the world outside that small wooden town seemed to disappear. "Evening," he said, voice like gravel softened by whiskey. "Name's Cole. I'm looking for a place to rest my horse, and maybe a hot meal." Lila gave a curt nod, but her eyes lingered, sensing that this stranger carried stories stitched into the seams of his coat. Inside the saloon, the piano sat quiet, a relic of laughter and spun dreams. Lila hesitated at the door, fingertips brushing the worn keys. The patrons barely noticed her as she moved past, their conversations dulled by smoke and routine. Cole followed, eyes surveying the room, as if searching for a sign that life wasn't as dead as the desert outside. Something in the air shifted, a spark that made Lila's chest tighten, and for the first time in years, she imagined the piano singing under her fingers again. Night fell hard, wrapping Dry Creek in a velvet blanket punctuated by stars, and Cole found himself sitting across from Lila on a bench outside the saloon, the horses tethered nearby, tails swishing lazily. She spoke little, letting the silence stretch, but when she finally did, her voice was a whisper of wind through tumbleweeds. "You ride alone a lot, don't you?" Cole nodded, taking a sip from the tin cup in his hand. "Most of the time, yes ma'am. But a man's never truly alone if he keeps his eyes open for folks worth meeting." Lila's lips twitched in the hint of a smile, a spark of life she hadn't known she still carried. They walked together to the edge of town, where the prairie spilled into endless black, the stars above like scattered diamonds on velvet. Cole stopped and lifted a hand toward her. "Ever dance under the sky like that?" he asked, voice gentle, probing. Lila hesitated, the memories of grief pressing down on her chest. She shook her head, yet she didn't step back. For the first time in years, the ache in her heart felt like it could be soothed, a rhythm waiting to be rediscovered. He extended his hand fully, palm open, and the gesture was simple, but in that moment, it held the weight of promise, courage, and something tenderly reckless. Lila took it, fingers brushing his, the touch electric in the cool night air. The prairie wind circled them, whispering through tall grass as if urging them to move. Cole stepped closer, guiding her gently and slowly. Like the first notes of a long-forgotten song, they swayed, her boots brushing the dirt, her heart lifting with every step. The stars above seemed to pulse with approval, and Lila realized that maybe, just maybe, she could feel alive again. The music was silent, yet it filled the space between them, invisible threads connecting her past with the hope of tonight. Cole's grip was steady, comforting, and for the first time in years, Lila laughed softly, a sound that mingled with the wind and made the prairie feel less empty. "You've got a good lead on the rhythm," Cole said, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. She laughed again, freer this time, and in that laughter, the darkness of old grief began to unravel. Lila knew that the night was just the beginning, that the dance she thought was lost forever might just have returned under the stars. The next morning, the sun rose sluggish and red, spilling light over the dusty rooftops of Dry Creek. Cole was already saddling his horse when Lila appeared at the edge of the corral, boots crunching on gravel, the memory of last night's dance still lingering in her chest like a heartbeat. "I thought I might find you," she said, voice tentative but carrying a strength that surprised her. Cole tipped his hat with a crooked smile. "Thought I'd find you first," he replied, and in the quiet, Lila realized that for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. They rode out together, the prairie stretching endlessly before them, golden and wild, each hoofbeat a drumbeat, echoing the rhythm they'd found under the stars. As they rode, Cole told her stories of towns he'd passed, of cattle drives and storms that had tested both horses and men. Lila listened, fascinated, her eyes tracing the horizon where sky kissed earth. Each tale carried the grit and glory of a life lived hard and honest, and she found herself laughing, a sound that startled even her. The wind tugged at her hair and dusted her cheeks, and she realized she hadn't felt this free in years. The fear of the past still lingered, but the world seemed larger now, more inviting, and Cole's presence felt like a steady hand guiding her forward. By midday, they reached a dry creek bed, lined with jagged stones and scrub. Cole dismounted and offered her a hand. "Come on, ma'am, can't let the sun fry your boots." She took it, gripping tightly, and for a moment their eyes met in silent understanding. Lila bent to touch the shallow water, feeling the coolness run over her fingers, the reflection of the sky in the ripples reminding her that beauty still existed, even in a land so harsh. Cole watched quietly, sensing the walls around her heart loosening just a little, the beginning of trust forming like roots beneath the parched earth. They camped near the creek that night, a fire crackling between them, the flames throwing shadows across Cole's rugged features. Lila stirred the coals with a stick, embers glinting like tiny stars mirroring the night sky. "You ever wonder if folks just keep wandering 'cause they're running from something?" Cole asked, breaking the silence. Lila nodded slowly. "I reckon so. Some of us carry more than just our shadows. Some of us carry ghosts." He chuckled low, and they shared a quiet moment, neither needing to speak more. The fire's warmth wrapped around them, and Lila realized that the world hadn't stopped offering chances. It had only waited for her to take one. The following days blurred into a rhythm of riding, resting, and sharing stories by the fire. Lila's confidence grew with every mile, her laughter returning like a melody long forgotten. Cole noticed the subtle change, how she stood taller in the saddle, how her eyes sparkled when she spoke of old dreams. They rode into small towns, and in each saloon, the piano waited for her, silent yet beckoning. Once, she allowed her fingers to brush the keys, and though the notes faltered, they sang of hope. Cole's hand hovered nearby, a silent encouragement, and Lila realized that her fear was fading, replaced by a quiet, daring to believe in music again. One evening, they reached a ridge that overlooked a valley blanketed in wildflowers, the sun dipping low, setting the petals ablaze with red and gold. Cole dismounted and extended his hand. "Care to dance again?" he asked, voice rough with earnest. Lila hesitated, the memory of pain whispering in her ear, but she took his hand, fingers intertwining, and they moved together in the open air, boots brushing grass, hearts sinking with the fading light. A hawk circled above them, and for the first time, Lila felt the vastness of the prairie match, the vastness of her own courage. Their connection deepened with each shared step, the nightfall wrapping them in a blanket of stars and whispered secrets. Cole spoke of his past losses, of long rides alone, and the regrets he carried, and Lila shared her own memories of dances that ended too soon, of a father lost and a dream abandoned. They laughed through tears, learning that vulnerability could be as freeing as any gallop across the plains. Each night, as they returned to their campfires, Lila's heart felt lighter, the dance of trust binding them together in ways that neither had expected. But the prairie held its own dangers, shadows among the wildflowers, rumors of outlaws hiding in the canyons, and townsfolk who distrusted strangers. Cole's instincts sharpened, eyes scanning every ridge and hollow, and Lila, though still cautious, began to ride alongside him with a steady confidence, learning the rhythm of danger and the weight of vigilance. The bond between them strengthened, forged in shared adventure and quiet courage. Each day's ride became a lesson, not just in survival, but in the fragile, exhilarating art of letting someone in. And as they rode beneath the endless sky, Lila knew that her dance had changed, no longer just a memory, but a living, breathing promise of what could come next. The morning air was sharp, carrying the scent of sage and dust, as Lila and Cole rode toward a narrow canyon rumored to harbor outlaws, tension prickling along the edges of their courage. The valley below spread like a patchwork of golden grasses and shadowed crevices, and Lila's heart raced, not from fear alone, but from the pulse of adventure that had been absent in her life for too long. Cole kept his eyes forward, scanning the ridges, every movement precise and measured, and Lila followed suit, her hands firm on the reins, feeling the quiet thrill of standing beside a man who moved with purpose and honor. As they entered the canyon, a sudden rustle among the rocks caught their attention. Cole signaled her to halt, and she froze, breath caught between fear and anticipation. From behind a boulder, 3 men emerged, faces masked with dust and malice, revolvers glinting in the sun. Well, what do we have here? The tallest sneered, boots scraping stones. Cole's hand rested on his own pistol, calm but ready. Lila's pulse pounded in her ears, yet she felt an unfamiliar steadiness, as if the prairie itself had lent her courage. Words were exchanged, tense and sharp, threats flaring like sparks from dry timber. Cole's voice was low, deliberate. "You boys best turn back before this ride gets ugly." The outlaws laughed, closing the distance, and suddenly, the canyon echoed with the sound of hooves pounding and gunfire cracking like lightning. Lila ducked behind her horse, heart hammering, yet through it all, she sensed Cole's presence beside her, his steady hand brushing hers, a silent reassurance that even amidst chaos, she wasn't alone. The fight was brief but fierce, Cole's aim precise, taking advantage of the canyon's twists and shadows. Lila's fear transformed into action, tossing sand and distracting one of the men long enough for Cole to disarm him. By the time the sun touched the canyon's peak, the outlaws were fleeing, leaving only the echo of their threats and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Lila exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her hands trembling but alive. "You all right, ma'am?" Cole asked, voice steady, and she nodded, feeling a fierce pride, not in the danger itself, but in the strength she had found within. That night, they rode back to a quiet ridge above Dry Creek, the town's lanterns twinkling like fireflies below. Cole unsaddled his horse and extended a hand once more. "Care to finish our dance, Lila?" She hesitated only a moment before stepping into his embrace, the prairie wind sweeping her hair around her face, boots brushing the grass, heart sinking with the rhythm of freedom. The stars above shone brighter than ever, as if celebrating her courage, her laughter ringing through the open air, carrying the joy she thought she'd lost forever. They moved together beneath the heavens, every step a reclamation of the past, every turn a defiance of the sorrow that had once bound her. Cole's hand was firm yet gentle, guiding her with unwavering trust, and Lila let herself be carried by the rhythm of their connection. The prairie seemed to join in, whispering through the grasses, the faint scent of wildflowers mingling with the night air as they danced. Lila realized she had found something far greater than herself, a partnership that honored both strength and vulnerability. When the dance ended, they collapsed onto the grass, breathless and laughing, the night folding around them like a protective cloak. Cole brushed a strand of hair from her face, eyes soft in the starlight. "You're a sight, Lila, braver than I ever thought I'd meet." She smiled, her heart full, the pain of the past softened. "And you're not so bad yourself, Cole." Their hands remained intertwined, fingers laced like the ties that had brought them together, and in that quiet, the world felt infinite, offering every promise they dared to imagine. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, a land of dust and dreams, stars and wind. Lila realized that her dance had never truly ended. It had only been waiting for the right moment, for the right hand to take hers. Cole's presence had taught her to trust again, to move again, and to hope again. As dawn began to tinge the horizon with soft gold, they rose together, ready to face whatever roads lay ahead. The music was silent still, yet it played louder in their hearts than ever before, and Lila knew she would never forget this night, this dance, under the endless western sky, where love and courage intertwined.